In a world where goodness is praised as an absolute virtue and noble intentions are always seen as commendable, Niccolò Machiavelli emerges as a disturbing voice that whispers, good intentions do not guarantee good outcomes. At times, they may even open the door to disaster. Machiavelli's philosophy doesn't glorify evil for its own sake. Instead, it casts a harsh light on the complex realities of power where morality often bends under the weight of necessity, and where noble ideals can collapse when confronted with raw force. In The Prince, his most infamous work, Machiavelli doesn't preach or reform, he observes. He sees people as they are, not as we wish them to be. He understood that virtue alone cannot build a state, and that a leader who clings too tightly to lofty ideals in a ruthless world may well be crushed by it. To him, cruelty can be wisdom, deception, a strategic necessity, and unwavering principles. Sometimes, the fastest path to political suicide, take a ruler who governs gently and justly, never punishing harshly, never spying, always showing mercy. He might look noble, almost ideal. But what happens when enemies mistake his kindness for weakness? Or when his hesitation in the face of threat leads to ruin? Machiavelli doesn't hesitate. Such a ruler, however pure his heart, leads his people toward destruction. His lesson isn't an invitation to injustice, but a warning against political naivete. He doesn't despise virtue, fears its misuse. It is better to be feared than loved. He famously said, if you cannot be both, because fear is predictable, love is not. And when survival is on the line, certainty wins. This message still provokes discomfort. We cling to the hope that the good will triumph, that pure intentions will mend a broken world, but history tells a different story, one where leaders fell because they trusted too much or forgave when decisiveness was needed, and nations, some collapsed because their rulers chose popularity over effectiveness. Machiavellian philosophy doesn't hand you a clean recipe for success. It forces you to face hard questions. Is goodness always good? Are good intentions ever enough? And when does moral idealism become a fatal weakness? That's the journey we begin in this text, a confrontation with the shadow side of virtue, seen through the eyes of a man who believed that, at times, cruelty saves, deception protects, and blind goodness destroys. The deeper you dive into philosophy, the clearer it becomes. He wasn't obsessed with morality or immorality, he was obsessed with outcomes. His focus wasn't on whether an action was good or bad in a moral sense, but whether it was politically effective. For him, a successful reign isn't measured by purity of heart, but by the ability to maintain control, stability, and unity. In that light, traditional virtues become tools, not ends. You use them when they serve you, and discard them when they don't. Machiavelli didn't despise virtue. What he rejected was the worship of it. In his view, morals alone won't hold a nation together, because people themselves are not consistently moral. Crowds are fickle, they adore you today, hate you tomorrow, and betray you without warning. So any ruler who relies solely on being loved, without instilling a healthy fear, or calculating every step, risks everything. This isn't just abstract theory. Think of the modern world. How many honest, well-meaning leaders have failed because they trusted too easily? How many revolutions began with dreams of justice, only to spiral into chaos because their idealistic leaders weren't ready for betrayal, ambition, or the hunger for power? You won't hear these questions in passionate speeches, but they echo loudly in Machiavelli's pages grounded not in fantasy, but in the world as it really is. Then there's the infamous phrase, the ends justify the means. While he never said it outright, this idea runs deep in his logic. If the final result is peace, unity, and survival of the state, then the methods used to get there can't be judged by the same standards we apply to personal ethics. That's where the tension lies. Machiavelli wasn't a devil in disguise, as some claim. He was simply painfully realistic. He knew this world doesn't always reward the righteous. Sometimes, the ruler who lies with skill and strikes with precision does more good for their people than the saint who crumbles under pressure. In this light, we're forced to rethink our definition of good. Is goodness always about kindness? Or is it about protecting the collective, even through painful decisions? Machiavelli answers without flinching. In leadership, goodness is what preserves the state, prevents collapse. and shields the weak from the strong. And if that means making choices that seem immoral at first glance, so be it. To many, this sounds dark, even brutal. Especially to those raised to believe that honesty is always best, that compassion is always the answer. But the world has taught us otherwise. How often have leaders failed because they hesitated to act? How often have well-meaning officials been manipulated, bringing down entire institutions with them? Machiavelli doesn't ask you to abandon your humanity. He asks you to understand its limits. He doesn't mock goodness. He warns you not to wear it blindly. For him, goodness must not be naive. It must be sharp, informed, and capable of looking reality in the eye before pleasing the conscience. To truly grasp Machiavelli's worldview, we have to go back to the world he lived in. Renaissance Italy was not a unified country, it was a battlefield of rival city-states, feuding families, and unstable alliances. Plots weren't just whispered in palaces, but in churches too. Loyalty shifted with the wind, and betrayal wasn't scandalous, it was strategic. In such a landscape, navit wasn't a flaw, it was a death sentence. Excessive kindness wasn't seen as a virtue, but as an open invitation to be exploited. And Machiavelli, who had served as a diplomat and had witnessed the machinery of power up close, knew firsthand how often the good guys were crushed while the clever ones, those who could wear virtue like a mask and discard it when needed, were the ones who survived. That's why the prince struck a nerve. It wasn't a call to villainy, but a brutally honest guide to surviving in a world that doesn't play fair. Machiavelli didn't glorify betrayal, he explained when it becomes politically necessary. The book is not titled How to Be a Good Person, it's called The Prince, and it's about the art of staying in power. But make no mistake, Machiavelli wasn't devoid of a moral compass. He acknowledged that rulers benefit from their people's affection. He spoke of the value of balance over tyranny. Yet all of these ideals came with a caveat. If kindness puts the state at risk, it must be re-evaluated. If noble intentions become obstacles to sound decisions, they must be cut away. And this is the paradox at the heart of his thinking. Sometimes, the most ethical action is the least politically viable. Imagine a ruler who refuses to suppress a minor rebellion out of respect for free speech, only to see it grow into civil war. Or a leader who lets a corrupt politician roam free out of loyalty to legal principles, only to watch that same politician undermine the regime from within. These aren't hypotheticals, they're warnings. In such moments, moral absolutism hits a wall. There's a need for something else, what we might call pragmatic ethics, a way of weighing outcomes, not just intentions. From Machiavelli's perspective, a good leader isn't the one who clings to high ideals at any cost. It's the one who knows when to bend, when to sacrifice appearance for substance, and when to protect the greater good even if that means muddying their hands. It may sound harsh, but at its core, it's a call to responsibility. Don't sacrifice your people for the sake of a polished moral image. Don't let your righteousness become the knife that cuts your own nation's throat. And this logic isn't limited to politics. It reaches into our personal lives too. How many times have we lost something precious by being too generous? How often have we forgiven someone who only came back to hurt us again? How many missteps have we made because we wanted to be the good one? Machiavelli reminds us, even goodness is a form of power, and, like any power, it needs limits, awareness, and the courage to say no when necessary. His philosophy isn't an invitation to become a wolf, it's a warning. Don't stay a lamb in a forest of wolves. Learn the rules of the game more, you may not survive it. At its heart, it's not a call to cruelty, but to wisdom. One of the most striking elements in Machiavelli's philosophy is his distinction between private morality and public responsibility. What is expected from an individual? Honesty, forgiveness, kindnesses, not necessarily what's expected from a ruler. Leaders operate on a different plane. They are judged not by their intentions, but by the weight of their decisions and their impact on the collective. This ethical duality reveals just how deep Machiavelli's insights go. He doesn't reject morality, he contextualizes it. For him, ethics aren't one-size-fits-all principles. They're adaptive frameworks that shift depending on the role you play. To govern is not merely to follow your conscience, it's to carry the burdens of a people, a future, and a nation. And excessive goodness, in that context, can unintentionally become a betrayal. History has already provided the cautionary tales. Take Louis XVI of France, by all accounts a well-meaning monarch, mild, reluctant to use force, hesitant to silence opposition. But his indecision and soft-handedness played no small role in the fall of the monarchy and the chaos that followed. He ended his reign at the guillotine, a textbook example of what Machiavelli warned against, that good intentions don't always yield good outcomes. Now contrast that with figures like Richard III or Otto von Bismarck. Both employed strategy, ruthlessness, and manipulation when needed. They weren't saints, but they understood the game. And that's why Machiavelli respected such leaders not for their cruelty, but for their realism. They didn't sacrifice results at the altar of idealism. This doesn't just apply to political history, it applies to everyday life. How many times have we faced a decision where the right thing to do felt wrong in the moment, yet necessary? Breaking off a toxic relationship despite still caring. Removing someone from your life to protect your peace? These are the modern Machiavellian moments where blind adherence to being good could turn into self-destruction. What sets Machiavelli apart from other political thinkers is his refusal to speak in moral platitudes. He doesn't ask, "What is the right thing to do?" He asks, "What works?" That question might unsettle us, but it forces a level of clarity that abstract idealism never will. In politics, as in life, reality doesn't play by the rules of fantasy. Yet, Machiavelli's intent was never to glorify evil. He didn't champion cruelty for its own sake. On the contrary, he argued that the ideal leader is one who can perform virtue when it benefits the state and suspend it when it endangers it. Someone who knows when to offer the open hand and when to strike. The true danger, in his eyes, isn't occasional harshness, it's chronic naivete. Naivete, dressed in the costume of virtue, may look noble on the surface, but in practice, it opens the gates to disaster. And here's the haunting question Machiavelli leaves us with. Are we wise enough to put limits on our kindness? Or are we so attached to our image of goodness that we'd rather fall looking noble than stand by making tough choices? That, to Machiavelli, is the true ethical failure, not cruelty, but cowardice wrapped in idealism. As we delve further into Machiavelli's thinking, it becomes evident that his message wasn't only directed at rulers, it was meant for the people too. He challenges a deeply rooted illusion that the masses are inherently loyal, grateful, and morally upright. In Machiavelli's view, the public doesn't remain faithful out of principle, they remain faithful out of interest. When their interests shift, so does their without a trace of guilt. This uncomfortable truth dismantles the romantic image of a virtuous populace. Machiavelli doesn't let anyone off the hook, not the leader, not the lead foot, everyone, in his eyes, operates from a tangle of self-interest, fear, and ambition. That's why his philosophy feels like a mirror. We don't want to look into it, doesn't flatter, it reveals, and it's from this brutal realism that he draws one of his most controversial conclusions. Fear is more reliable than love when it comes to ruling. Love is fleeting. It's built on expectations and easily broken. Fear, on the other hand, is stable. It keeps order when loyalty falters. It is better to be feared than loved. He famously wrote, "If you cannot be both." But don't mistake this for an endorsement of tyranny. Machiavelli isn't calling for cruelty's sake. He insists that any use of force must be calculated, swift, and purposeful. Violence must never become routine. It must be surgical, a single cut that prevents the disease from spreading, not endless blows that breed resentment. This is what he calls measured cruelty. A chilling phrase, perhaps, but one that forces us to rethink our definitions of justice and mercy. Because too much mercy can unleash chaos, and to slow a justice may be seen as weakness. Between these extremes stands the ruler, not as a judge, but as a guardian of national survival. That's where the real danger of blind goodness begins. When a leader clings to their self-image as a benevolent figure and avoids tough decisions out of fear of appearing harsh, they're prioritizing their personal comfort over their people's safety. And that's the very doom Machiavelli warns about. Destruction born not of malice, but of unwise virtue. Picture a leader who always opts for de-escalation, who avoids confronting threats in the name of peace, while enemies grow bolder. Imagine another who refuses to suspend constitutional norms in a national emergency, even as the nation is being gutted from within. Both are well-intentioned, both are marching their people toward disaster. Machiavelli reminds us, values without political intelligence can become weapons turned against us. Leadership demands a cool head, not just a warm heart. That doesn't mean abandoning principles, it means learning how to protect them without being consumed by them. Knowing when to stand firm, and when to move subtly in their defense. In this light, Machiavelli resembles more a surgeon than a villain, not rejoicing in the cut, but not hesitating if it's the only way to save the body. He doesn't twist truth, he strips it bare. And that's why his lessons go beyond politics. They apply to all of us. How to balance kindness with clarity, mercy with strength without losing ourselves or those who rely on us. What makes Machiavelli's philosophy so striking is that he doesn't see morality as an enemy, he sees it as a tool. And that subtle shift changes everything. It opens the door to a more mature understanding of ethics. Not every value is appropriate in every situation. And not every virtue remains a virtue when it leads to ruin. A word that sounds kind can, in the wrong moment, become poison. A decision that seems harsh may, in truth, be the path to long-term salvation. Machiavelli draws a hard line between personal ethics and political ethics. In ordinary life, qualities like honesty, transparency, and forgiveness are noble and admirable. But in the realm of power, those same traits can be dangerous liabilities. Politics, in his view, is not a continuation of morality. It's a separate domain with its own brutal rules, where outcomes trump appearances. That's why he famously insisted, a leader doesn't need to be virtuous, but they must appear virtuous. People don't see what's in your heart, they judge the performance you present. If a ruler can project virtue when necessary, and deploy ruthlessness when required, they may achieve the perfect balance between moral image and political strength. This is one of Machiavelli's most unsettling truths. In politics, appearance often outweighs essence. But this isn't an invitation to hypocrisy, it's an honest diagnosis of how human perception works. The public doesn't have full access to the truth. They rely on speeches, symbols, and optics. That means a ruler must understand the stage just as well as the battlefield. Machiavelli grasped this theatrical side of power long before modern political theorists caught up. He portrayed the ideal ruler as both fox and lion, the fox for cunning and avoidance of traps, the lion for raw strength to keep predators at bay. Anyone who lacks one or the other, he warned, won't stay in power long. The fox sees danger before stepping in it. The lion ensures no one dares to pounce. This metaphor perfectly encapsulates Machiavelli's so-called harsh realism. But in truth, it's not cruelty, he advocates its full-spectrum awareness. He's not promoting treachery or brute force, but a mastery of complexity. Because in power, kindness alone is not a shield, it's often an exposed throat. Look around today, and you'll see the same pattern. Politicians with spotless public images who speak of peace, liberty, and justice while making ruthless decisions behind closed doors, all for what they call the greater good. We might call it hypocrisy. Machiavelli calls it leadership. Not ideal, but necessary. That raises uncomfortable questions. When does honesty become a threat? When does forgiveness enable abuse? When does transparency breed instability? These aren't just semantic debates, they're real, dangerous dilemmas. They remind us that even goodness must be applied with care. Because values don't operate in a vacuum, they live in a world filled with clashing interests, unpredictable forces, and harsh consequences. For Machiavelli, the greatest danger isn't strategic cruelty, it's foolish virtue. Morality that can't defend itself isn't virtue at all. It's weakness in disguise. And the one who doesn't master reality, no matter how noble they seem, may end up not as a savior, but as a burden. As we reflect deeper on Machiavelli's ideas, it becomes clear. He wasn't only speaking to kings and rulers, he was addressing anyone who holds a position of influence. Leaders, managers, parents, teachers, even friends, in moments of responsibility. Anyone faced with a difficult choice between what's morally right and what's actually effective lives through what we might call a Machiavellian moment. In those moments, it's tempting to retreat into virtue. to choose softness, to delay confrontation, to say, "I just don't want to hurt anyone." But Machiavelli warns us postponing the hard choice doesn't kill the conflict. It allows it to grow in the shadows. Fear of firmness, when disguised as kindness, often leads to far greater pain in the end. How many fathers hesitated to discipline a child only to raise someone who never learned limits? How many? Managers ignored one toxic employee only to lose the respect of the entire team. How many political leaders refused to act early and then faced a crisis that could have been avoided? These are not failures of evil, they're failures of poorly used goodness, what Machiavelli would call fatal virtue. From this lens, goodness is no longer defined by intention, but by impact. And the reverse is also true. Cruelty, when restrained, strategic, and aimed at protecting a greater whole, might actually be a form of ethical action. That thought turns our familiar moral compass on its head, but it also forces us to ask what actually serves the good. That's Machiavelli's brilliance. He doesn't give us a license to be corrupt. He gives us a challenge. What truly defends what we value? Is it silence or strength? Is it blind forgiveness or bold confrontation? These aren't yes or no questions, but they push us to stop playing pretend when lives, systems, and futures are at stake. Perhaps the most liberating part of his philosophy is that it breaks us free from the cartoonish good versus evil narrative. We are not angels, we are not demons, we are human, flawed, layered, inconsistent. And what Machiavelli asks is not that we become cold, but that we grow up, that we have the courage to face the truth. Sometimes we choose to look good instead of doing what actually works. And that desire to appear noble, it's not always pure. It can be selfish. We're not trying to protect others. We're protecting our own image. We want to say, "I didn't hurt anyone," even if the cost of our inaction was someone else's suffering. In that case, kindness becomes cowardice in disguise. Self-honesty, that's where Machiavellian maturity begins. Asking ourselves before every decision, what will actually help? What will protect? What matters? Not what will make me look better. As Machiavelli would put it, appearances can be faked, but results don't lie. And in leadership, real or personal, that's but measure that truly matters. In our modern societies, we're often raised to believe that goodness is an absolute value, one that needs no context or nuance. Children are taught to always tell the truth, to forgive quickly, to be kind even to those who hurt them. These lessons sound noble. They create polite, empathetic individuals. But Machiavelli forces us to ask what happens when these individuals enter a world that doesn't play by those same rules. Because the world, as Machiavelli saw it, as many of us have experienced, is not fair. It's filled with wolves and foxes, and not everyone will reward your kindness. Some will see it as weakness, some will take advantage of it. And if you've been raised on nothing but softness, you'll shatter the moment life gets sharp. This isn't a call to raise children on cruelty, it's a call to raise them on awareness. To teach them that kindness does not mean submission, that forgiveness does not mean allowing repeated harm, that should be paired with wisdom, and that strength doesn't kill nobility, it protects it. Seen through this lens, Machiavelli's philosophy doesn't destroy ethics, it rebuilds them. It lifts them out of storybooks and puts them into real life, where timing matters, where decisions carry weight, and where outcomes affect more than just the self. In this context, morality becomes something intelligent, not naive. Some might ask, but what about faith? What about the spiritual values that tell us there's a higher judgment beyond this world? Machiavelli never wrote a religion, he wrote politics. He wasn't a prophet, he was an analyst of power. His ideas don't deny faith, but they remind us that even faith needs protection. And sometimes, that protection requires more than prayer, it requires force. How many mosques have been destroyed? How many liberties erased? Because people believed goodness alone would shield them. How many idealists lost their voices because they didn't prepare for opposition? That came not with debate, but with fire and iron. The uncomfortable truth, a message survives not because it is pure, but because it is defended. Machiavelli doesn't hand you neat answers, he gives you the hard questions. That's the difference. He demands that we stop thinking with just one eye. Goodness alone is not enough. It must be accompanied by awareness, strength, courage, and the willingness to do what's uncomfortable, if that's what truly serves the greater good. That's where Machiavelli pushes us not toward blind morality, but toward conscious virtue, toward goodness that knows when to stand, when to yield, when to strike, and when to wait. It's not a mask, it's a choice. One that doesn't hide behind ideals, but fights to turn them into something real and lasting. When read this way, Machiavelli isn't mocking virtue, he's challenging it to grow up. He's not asking us to abandon kindness, but to arm it with clarity. Not to discard morality, but to strip it of fragility. He's saying, don't let your goodness become your downfall. Make it your shield, not your burden. Let your strength protect, not oppress, because the world will not show mercy to those who show too much to themselves. Once we reach this depth of understanding, it becomes clear that Machiavelli's philosophy extends far beyond politics. It touches something deeply human, the internal conflict we all face when forced to choose between appearing good and doing what's necessary, even if that choice hurts. Every close relationship, every major decision, hides what we might call a Machiavellian moment. A moment where the truth must be spoken, even if it wounds. Where a bond must be broken, even if love remains. Where a boundary must be drawn, even if you're branded as cruel. These moments aren't signs of failure, they're signs of maturity. To Machiavelli, a mature person is not the one who pleases everyone. It's the one who accepts the cost of doing what's right even when misunderstood. The one who places truth above image and the well-being of others above applause. The one who values the long-term good over short-term comfort. This brings us back to his core warning. Goodness without wisdom becomes weakness. Kindness without courage becomes surrender. Forgiveness without discernment becomes an invitation to chaos. Machiavelli isn't attacking these virtues, he's attacking their blind, reckless application. What he proposes instead is responsible ethics, a code of conduct rooted in consequences. Because intention alone doesn't clear you of the damage you cause. If you act in kindness but ignore what that kindness enables, you're not virtuous, you're careless. If you avoid confrontation just to protect your peace, and in doing so, let the rot spread, you're not kind, you're complicit. And this exact dynamic plays out in the most personal parts of our lives. We all face choices that force us to pick between what feels right now and what is truly right. Over time, between avoiding discomfort and preserving what really matters, between being liked and doing what protects those we care about. Machiavelli isn't asking us to become emotionless, he's asking us to feel and still choose wisely. To acknowledge the pain of a difficult act and do it anyway if it's what brings healing. To see that toughness in the right moment can be the purest form of mercy. That sometimes real love says no. In the end, we're not only judged by what we do but by what we allow, what we stay silent about, what we excuse in the name of being nice. Machiavelli forces us to wake up. Being good doesn't mean turning a blind eye to danger. It means having the strength to stop it. It doesn't mean avoiding hard decisions. It means carrying them, no matter the cost. This is the heart of his call, not a fall into moral decay, but a rise into moral adulthood. Not to become harsher, but to become wiser. Not to lie to ourselves, but to face the truth with open eyes. Machiavelli speaks not to those who want to dominate, but to those brave enough to protect what matters, no matter how uncomfortable that protection may be. At the end of this journey through Machiavelli's philosophy, we realize he never meant to offer a clean formula for life. He wasn't inviting us to become ruthless manipulators or cold tacticians. What he gave us was a mirror, one that forces us to confront a single haunting question. How do we live with awareness in a world that doesn't always reward good intentions? Machiavelli didn't reject values. He simply asked, are we applying them from a position of strength or from a place of fear? Are we truly virtuous or simply powerless? And if our goodness can't defend itself, does it even matter? Is it fair to blame the world for our failure when we refused to do what needed to be done? In a world filled with shifting alliances, hidden agendas, and quiet betrayals, being a good person is no longer enough. You must also be alert, strategic, brave, because kindness alone can blind you. But conscious, aware goodness, that's what truly protects. That's the brilliance of Machiavelli. He doesn't destroy values, he reclaims them. He strips them of illusion and retools them for real-life survival. And yes, his truths might make some recoil. They might feel cold, cynical, even frightening. But experience shows us life rarely rewards the naive. Machiavelli urges us to become strong and good, to use our values like a surgeon uses a scalpel, with precision, intention, and restraint, to master our emotions, not suppress them, but also not let them hijack our judgment, to act from clarity, not cowardice, and to never fear the hard choice when it's the only path that leads forward. This logic applies to leaders, yes, but it also applies to anyone standing at a crossroads. In love, in business, in family, in moments where we must decide. Do I speak the truth or stay silent? Do I make the hard call or protect my image? Do I seek approval or do I do what's right, even if I do it alone? Those who read Machiavelli looking for permission to oppress will find a villain. Those who read him searching for wisdom will find a teacher. What you see in his words reflects your own motives. But at his core, Machiavelli wanted just one thing: to save leaders from blind idealism and to save the people from weak leadership. His ultimate lesson, that real ethics are not what we say they're, what we do when it counts. They're not what we preach in moments of ease, but what we protect when everything's at risk. And that kindness, when not paired with courage, becomes silent betrayal. In a world that worships performance, glamorizes virtue signaling, and rewards surface over substance, we need depth more than ever. We need to understand that the hardest choices often carry the most integrity. That protecting those we love won't always be pretty, but it will be real. So, we leave Machiavelli behind, not with his book in hand, but with a sharper kind of awareness in our hearts. True goodness never fears power. In fact, it calls upon it. And sometimes, protecting what is noble requires decisions that only the strong will ever understand.